Hey, Richard Mell here again for Facts for Working People. And I wanted to comment on something today. I was going to write about it, but it might be easier this way for me. And that's this whole question of identity politics in the United States. Identity politics is very, very strong here. And it's actually used, it's reactionary and divisive. Now, not everybody that uses it consciously does it for that reason, but that's the result of it, because it either undermines and weakens the issue of class unity and class solidarity, and we can't build socialism, we can't get rid of capitalism without class solidarity, without uniting the working class. And that it's used by the ruling class in this country. It's where that actually arises in the main, in the ruling class in this country, the bourgeois in this country, as a means of dividing and weakening the working class. It's thoroughly reactionary. And you see it everywhere. I mean, I have to deal with it everywhere. And generally, if you're a white worker and you raise that issue, you'll be attacked by the liberals and others, well-meaning enough, as being a class reductionist who place class unity above racism, sexism, and these other issues that people have to face within capitalist society. And they also various terms out of left-wing academia and the middle classes that are used to strengthen this idea of identity politics, and that's the main issue in society today. And I remember being like at a meeting in Berkeley. It was I think it was a Green Party meeting. It was about trying to organise workers. I never heard the term workers once. I never heard the term working class once. I heard about organic food, about gender oppression, about various agendas that I'd not quite heard of, about environment. All of these issues that are relevant within the context of trying to unite the working class, because we have to draw all oppressed sections of society into the class. If we don't unite the working class, we not just into the class, they're in it, but unified in it, and we won't be able to unify the working class if we don't deal with these special oppressions. But they are used by the American bourgeois, by the ruling class in this country, to divide and weaken the working class, to obscure the class question. When I first came to this country, somebody told me I was middle class. I was quite insulted about that. I didn't consider myself middle class, and I had no aspiration to be middle class. But this whole idea, this identity politics, is a thoroughly reactionary and divisive issue. And you see, I was reading that Elizabeth Warren, she was speaking. She's a major She's a major bourgeois politician in this country, liberal, progressive. I don't know what that means, really. If they want to make capitalism nice, that's the only thing I can understand about them. They want to make capitalism nice. And she was speaking at a Netroot convention last week, and they were very proud because 69% of the people, according to what I read, were people of colour. What their political views were, of course, is a different matter. That's irrelevant. They were all probably people of colour that wanted to advance within the framework of capitalism and build and find a larger role for them within the capitalist system. But they were very happy about that. And she's talking about how she says, well, the system is rigged. She says, against a number of marginalised groups, including, quote, women, LGBTQ people, and African Americans. And, of course, it is rigged against them. It's rigged against all workers. The system is a system of theft against all workers. That doesn't mean we don't, those of us socialists that don't recognise the need to deal with the question and to have a program and a strategy for the question of what we used to call specially oppressed minorities or marginalized groups or what have you. We do, because we won't be able to overthrow capitalism without doing that. And but it's extremely dangerous stuff. And if you think about it, you see those ideas are, for her, it's conscious to ignore the working class. It's very conscious. But the difference between her and the middle class liberals that pick it up and others that pick it up, it's not quite so conscious for them. People like Elizabeth Warren and the ruling class in this country understand there's a working class. They understand history. They fear the working class. If they didn't fear the working class, and if it wasn't in our the general tendency of the working class when we move into struggle to overcome these differences. I'll never forget being on a picket line in Macy's years and years ago. It was every sort of character on that picket line. Blue collar workers were on that picket line, and Macy's employees were tending to be much more of a diverse group in all sorts of ways. The solidarity was great. So the bourgeois are very clear, people like Elizabeth Warren, that the working class is a dangerous force. There is a tendency for the working class to unite when we move into struggle against the bosses, and it's conscious for them to divide us in some sort of way, along race, along gender. Look at Northern Ireland, look at Israel, Palestine, look at any situation. They are very conscious, and that's what this identity politics is from their point of view. It's this form of dividing and weakening the working class. It's a thoroughly reactionary strategy, but very conscious. Of course, it's different among other sections of the middle class. Even if you take, let's take nationalists, various nationalist groups. Let's take black nationalists or whatever, for example. You can't. Many of them, their philosophy I don't agree with. They believe that the solution to racism is black capitalism. That Malcolm X said that you can't have capitalism without racism, and I agree with that. And I don't believe that black capitalism can solve the problem of racism in society, but there are those that genuinely do, and you can't blame, given the history in this country of certain political people that are in political having that point of view. Even workers I worked with who had a much stronger class consciousness than most of the students I was involved with, lefty students up in Berkeley, still supported the idea that if we had more shops, if we had more businesses, if there were more black capitalists, it would help their community better. They still viewed that, and in some ways they're right. In a small way they're right, but it won't eliminate this question of capitalism altogether. And also they also had the view, though, that the unity among working class people is what advanced their interests, and they understood that, and so did the older black guys that came up from the South and helped to build my union, despite the obstacles they had. And so it's conscious. So you can't not understand why a political person of colour might have that view. But the other side of it is there's a whole lot of opportunists as well that use that. In the trade union movement, there are those that use the special oppression of their group, women, blacks, Asians, Latinos. There's various caucuses, and those bodies are generally a means by which individuals in that community can rise into the bureaucracy, which is dominated by white males, and then it ends there. It's not a means of raising up or solving the problems. I remember there was a woman in AFSCME, became a big shot in AFSCME. She was a woman, she was a Latina. The conditions of those people still continue to decline. Jack Otero, I remember when he got a slot on the AFL-CIO. That doesn't work. Working class unity around issues that raise us all up and deals with and along with that deals with the historical oppression and exclusion of various groups at the same time. You can't just simply say, well, it's just a matter, we're all workers, racism doesn't matter. I remember a guy at work one time when he was a Latino guy. He never said much about politics. We called him, well, that's another matter. But he never said much about politics. And he was on the crew, and I was digging. I was a backhoe operator, and one of the white guys on there, a pretty conservative fellow, wasn't a bad guy, said something about affirmative action. It's not good because it divides us, and the usual argument a more less advanced white worker might make, that the best person for the job should get the job. And Carlos turns around and says, "You've had affirmative action 200 years," and he just snapped right back at him. He wasn't mean, but he was forceful. I'd never heard him say a word about politics. Even among blue collar workers where I worked, that situation, although the class consciousness is much higher, they also understand that question and the need that some views might be expressed among opportunists and others within the people of colour communities. Yeah, so I mean, I just remember another incident that I always wanted to share a little bit with people was when I was involved in the student movement up at Cal. There were a number of small businesses, a couple of them, I think, at the university in the food area, and these were contracted out. Those businesses, those services were contracted out by the university, which has public sector workers in it, including janitors, caretakers, and of course the clerks and everybody else. But these were contracted out, and where I used to work, the water district, it does the same thing in the reservoirs. It contracts it out, and often they'll give that to a minority capitalist who will get minority labour. That's really what they're after. They're after hiring labour and advancing themselves in their competition with the white capitalists for contracts and everything else, and they use that to say to the black workers, look, if I get the job, we'll hire you and what have you. It doesn't advance the black workers in the same way. And so they caught two of the owners there. I think there was something about one of the big chains moving into Cal up there, and two contractors, a burrito shop owner or a Mexican place owner and a Asian food place. They called a strike. They called a strike for a week in opposition to this. A whole bunch of the students I knew up there, or I was involved with up there, supported that, as they should. It wasn't a negative thing that they supported it, including many of the leftists and socialist ones that were new to socialism. And so I go up there, and I walk in the door, and I've got pictures of this, and I see the students all hanging around and getting their pictures taken with the bosses, the small capitalists, the owner of the runner, or the guy that owned the contract for the Mexican food, and the person that owned the contract for the Asian food. And as I looked over, I saw these 4 or 5 guys sitting around a table look pretty glum. And so I knew who they were. They were the workers in this place. So I walked over to them, and these were brown-skinned workers. You know, the obsession is with colour in this country. They were brown-skinned workers. I'm not a brown-skinned worker. I'm not a Latino. And so I walk over there, and I sit down, and I start talking to them. And we got to chatting, and I said, well, did you vote on this strike? Of course they didn't vote on this strike. This strike was called by the boss. And not only that, the boss told them they have to come up. These are low-wage workers. They couldn't go out and get a job for another week or so. And the boss told them they had to come up and be there for that week. They had to be there. That's why they looked so glum. Because you know what? They weren't sure they were getting paid. They weren't guaranteed to be paid or anything. They were not involved in this strike whatsoever. And I heard they got half pay or something like that. But I mean, those young students there, and I'd been attacked by some of them for being a class reductionist, for being a white guy and all of this, not understanding this, that and the other. I knew who those workers were immediately, okay? And they knew who I was as soon as we started talking, okay, about work and that. And that was completely lacking, because like the whole issue of identity politics, well, that was an issue of class. Many of them see themselves getting into university, becoming leaders of the working class in their particular marginalized community, if you like. You saw it in the big march, the 6 million strike, or the million strike, a couple of million people, Latinos, a few years ago in 2006. Who enters that? Enters that is the Latino petty bourgeois, the Catholic Church, and everybody, to undermine the class, the working class character of it. And so this is the biggest problem. And the thing is when you can go listen to KPFA, you can listen to panels talk about the issues in this society in America. You will never hear the working class mentioned among among these lefty types that discuss our lives and the society. You will never hear them talk about the working class as the force that can change society. Like in that rally I went to, the first speaker, don't know what happened when I left, but I was done with it. Never mentioned capitalism, never mentioned socialism, never mentioned the working class, never mentioned the need to unite the working class and fight back. We can shut down Oakland, a major economic hub in the United States. So they never mention the working class, because for them the working class doesn't exist, and their job is, and this is true of the left, the socialist left, is primarily, if not petty bourgeois in composition, it's petty bourgeois in culture. So they don't see the left as a force that can govern, as a force that can lead the struggle against capitalism, and as a force anyway. They're a force, if anything, to be led by them. But Warren, the bourgeois, they understand it. This identity, this issue of identity, they don't care. Well, Warren doesn't care about saying we need to reach out to LGBTQ people. The LGBTQ people, there are also different classes there. There are also different classes among the gay people, and they will be split. When I ran for Oakland City Council, I remember speaking to a group of people. In '96, my big issue was a $10 an hour minimum wage, and you could just see, and it was a mixed audience, is that the workers were all on one side, no matter what their ethnic background, no matter what their sexual orientation was, and the small coffee shop owners, small businesses and others were on the other side. One didn't want to pay the buyer of labour power didn't want to pay $10 an hour, and the seller of labour power, the worker, wanted to get $10 an hour and more. And that's what the division was, and that's the dominant division in society. And the reason they focus so much on identity politics is to obscure this fact. Now, when the working class moves into struggle, which it will in a major way, there's lots of individual battles, in a major way, that will change in and of itself. Like the marches, the Women's March, these other things. The trade union leaders, the Silence of the Lambs. Had there been thousands of workers like there was in Seattle, and they learned from that, had there been thousands of workers, the demands would be different, the mood would be different, the unity would be different, there would be more of a class unity, and you wouldn't have Johansson and Madonna up there leading the call for this, that and the other. The class lines would have been drawn right there. So these are just a few things. I want to keep these short so I get some people listen to me. It's a view I have of the world and others have of the world around our blog. If you want to engage yourself, you want to come into our weekly discussions, we'd like that. We're trying to build a think tank. Well, we are building a think tank for workers. The bosses have lots of them. If you want to join in on that, please send us an email. It's on this blog, and we'll send you. We have a general guidelines for it, but we'll contact you and let's talk about that. So anyway, that's it for today. Hope I've made some sense. Richard Miller, Facts for Working People. I've also joined DSA. I'm very enthused about that. It's a good development. All right. Thank you very much.